In this presentation, we will take a look at comparative financial statements for the first 2 months of operations. We will be generating a comparative balance sheet and comparative income statement within QuickBooks Pro 2019. For more accounting information and accounting courses, visit our website at accountinginstruction.info. Here we are in the home page. We currently have the open windows open. You can open the open windows by going to the view drop down and going to the open windows list. We've entered 2 months of operations at this time, and we're going to take a look at some financial statements that can compare the operations of those 2 months. To do so, we will go to the reports drop down up top. We're going to look at the balance sheet first, selecting the standard balance sheet and then doing some adjustments to it. That can be found in the company and financial, and then down in the balance sheet standard. So we're going to start off with the standard here. Now we're going to customize this report. So we're going to go to customize reports up top, and we're going to go down here first, changing the dates. So we're going to change the dates here, and we're going to change the dates just to the second month. So we're going to say 0201 19. So February is our second month of operations, and to 02/28/19, so the end of the month, 28 days in February. So we're going to say that this is going to be the month that we will be working in. Now, you might be thinking, if we're having a comparative balance sheet, why don't we have the entire time period? Why don't we have the January 1st through February 28th? And the reason is because really the balance sheet is as of a point in time. Note up here there's only one date, and on the balance sheet there's only one date. So no matter what date range we put into the system, it's only going to show one date if it was just one period balance sheet. So that means that it's only showing the end of the period. In other words, if I was just to have a balance sheet like this, and let's say OK right now, it still only shows these amounts as of the end of the period, even though I have a range beginning to end. So what we want to do really is to say to the system, I want the end of February and I want the end of January to be given side by side. And if you're thinking about, well, how would we construct the system to do that? One way we could do that, if we go back to customize, and we could say, well, you tell us what month is covered, what time period, and then we'll pick, the period previous to that. So if you say this was a month time period here, then we'll pick up the previous month. And that's what we'll do here. If we select this item, it should pick up then the previous month. So if I say OK, then it's going to say, all right, here's January, here's February. Note in this format that it's going to always have the later month first, so that we can read this kind of from left to right, which we would assume kind of is the most important on the left, the current month, and the less important on the right, the prior month. So then I'm going to go back to the customized report, and we want included in that, we may as well have the change, since there's only 2 months, tell us what the difference is, and then the percentage change. So those are useful additives to have with this report. Also note, as we're going through this, you might want to go through some of these other tabs, such as the header and footer, and see if you want these dates on there. So a lot of times we would remove the date, time, and report. You might want to remove those items, and you may want to customize the report titles as well if you want to have a balance sheet and call it, say, a comparative balance sheet. So I've now changed the title to a comparative balance sheet, and then for January and February 2019, something like that might be more appropriate, of course, for the title. So then I'm going to say OK. And so then we have this. We've got Get Great Guitars, comparative balance sheet, January and February. We've got the data, which is going to give us the February, the January, the difference between the two, this number minus this number, and then the change. And remember what the change means is it's going to have the difference here, 4744.39, divided by the first month, which is, in this case, 94436.17. And so there's that. If we move the decimal over, we get about 5%. So that's going to be, it's important to note that kind of information for these changes, because oftentimes we need to use statistics in that way. There's a 5% increase, because that allows us to compare activities of different financial statements that have different dollar amounts, different companies of different sizes in the same industry, for example. So that's going to be what we have all the way through on the comparative balance sheet. We're going to go ahead and print this now a couple different ways. So first I'm going to export it, and we'll show you how to, we'll export it to one tab again, so we can put it on one tab, and we'll print it as a PDF file. So let's go to the export or Excel and create a new workbook. And then we'll also create a new worksheet. So we're going to create a new worksheet as well, and then say export. So here's what we got. A couple things we would want to do here is usually go to the View tab up top, and in the Windows group, unsplit the panes. So I'll typically do that. Typically I go to the Layout group over here, this little Layout item, and that'll show us what the header is. So if we were to print that, you'd still see the header. It also gives us an idea of where the page breaks are, a better idea at least. And then if we go back to the normal view, that's what we have so far. We won't delete this yet. I'll delete that once we print the second report. And then it will double click on this tab down here, and we can change the name to something like Comparative Balance Sheet or something like that. And then say OK, and there we have it. Now, if we were to give this document to someone, they could print this out, or we can print it as a PDF. We'll show how to do that in a second as well. First, we want to save it. So I'm going to save this, and we're going to go to File, Save As. We're going to browse and see where we want to locate this file. I'm going to put it on the desktop. We're going to put it into Get Great Guitars, our folder here. I'm going to put it into Reports. And then we're going to put it into Section 8. So this is Section 8, I'm just going to call it. We might want to put it in practice by date and company. I'm going to put it into Section 8. Double click on Section 8. And then we're going to say, I'm just going to call it Section 8 Reports. 8 Reports. Now again, we might want to call it the reports for February of 2019. But I'm going to keep it Section 8 Reports for this purposes here. So we're going to say save it, and I'm going to say yes, and then we'll close this out, and we'll print the second report, which will be our comparative income statement. So we'll go through the similar process. We're going to go to Reports, we're going to go down to Company and Financial, and we're going to go to the Profit and Loss, which is also, the income statement. So we're going to say Profit and Loss. And then we'll go to the Customize Report and do a similar process, customize the report. We want to change the dates. We're going to say for the month of February, 02/01/19. So February 1st, 2019. Let's do the whole thing again. 02/01/19 to 02/28/19. So there's going to be a February, and again, you might be saying, well, why don't I do January through February? If we did that this time, if we took all January through February, it would give us one income statement for that entire time period. And what we want is two income statements compared to each other. So note that the income statement will have a range. September 1st through September 24th is what it has there. So we're going to need basically two dates, a beginning and an ending. In essence, what we have now is 4 dates, which is going to be a beginning and an ending of period 1, a beginning and an ending of period 2, January 1st to January 31st, period 1, February 1st to February 28th, period 2. So we have to define the first period, and then we could do the same kind of thing we did last time and say we want the previous period. And then if we say OK, it'll give us those 2 periods, February and January. And then we typically go back to the customized report and also add the change dollar amount and change in percentage. So same kind of activity. Now we may want to go up here again and go to the headers and get rid of possibly these dates and times. So we'll get rid of the date, time, and report basis. And once again, we might want to change the name. I'm going to change it to Comparative Income Statement. And we could say January and February. And so that'll give us a bit more detail. And then January, I adjusted that. So then we have that. I adjusted the spelling there. So then we have all this should be input, and so we're going to say OK. And so we have February and then January and then the change and then the percentage change. So we're going to have February. In January, the merchant sales were more. The difference is a negative change here, and the percentage change went down by 18%, which again would be something like taking the difference, which would be 467.4, divided by the first month, which in this case is 2467.4, which gives us that 18.9 if we move the decimal over 2 places. So this is going to be our second report. Again, let's export this to Excel, and then we'll take a look at some other ways we can save this information as well. So we're going to go to the Excel one up top. We're going to create a new worksheet, but this time we're going to put it into the existing workbook, the one we made last time, existing workbook. Locate that workbook by going to Browse, and then we're going to select this drop down and see where we put it. Get Great Guitars, Reports, but I want section 8 this time. There's our report. I'm just going to double click on it, and that should open it up, and I'm going to export. Here is our report. I put it in the middle, so typically I would left click on it, drag it to the right, rename it by double clicking on it and say comparative, possibly P and L or something like that, profit and loss, and then undo the splits up top by going to the View tab, going to the Windows and taking off that split, checking to see if it's all on one page if we were to print it by going to this item, to the page layout, this second little icon here. And we could see the headers up top, looks good, and it looks like it's on one page wide, which is what we want. So I'm going to go back to the normal view. And then this first sheet is something we would probably want to get rid of. Right click on it, delete that first sheet. Okay. And now we have these two tabs with these two reports. And we could give this to somebody if they're familiar with Excel and they would want the information in that format. Or we could print it by going to the File tab. And then I would rather, we could save it as a PDF, but I would rather print it. And then if we want to print it as a PDF, because we have the option then of not printing one worksheet at a time, but printing the entire workbook so that we can create a PDF file with two forms on it. So both of these documents could be in one PDF file rather than us having to break it up into two PDF files. This could be useful if we want to print, if we want to email or give or some multiple reports. So if we were to print this, then we'd have a PDF format like this, one PDF, two documents. So I'm going to save it here and save that. Now the other option we have to give this information to someone is to print it as a PDF or save it as a PDF and print it out. So we could do that by going to File and Save as PDF, or we can go to the Print Reports, and then I have it go into the PDF printer. Again, this is a free printer. I recommend having an option like this. You can preview this and then print it. And I'm going to save that into our same folder. Drop down. It's under Desktop. Get Great Guitars Reports, Section 8. And I'm just going to call this one the Comparative Income Statement, and say save that. And so then I'll do the same for the balance sheet. We'll go to the balance sheet and we'll say print report, but we're going to print it to the PDF writer. Okay. And then we're going to save it. It's going to the same location, and we're going to call that comparative balance sheet. And note, if you do this, then you're going to have two separate documents that you would then have to email or however you would distribute it, or zip the file in some way. Not too bad with two documents. If you've got 5 or 10 documents, then it can get somewhat tedious, and it might be better to see if you could put them all on one PDF file. It would be easier for the demonstration or the presentation. So we're going to say save, and those will be the two. Now there's one other report that we may want to look at just to check our numbers. So if we go through these two reports, if you're following along with this problem, and we can check these numbers, you're mainly looking at February. So you can go through February and check all these numbers as you go through these reports. And we would first check the balance sheet just like we did in January, check the balances, and you can confirm some of these balances by basically reconciling the bank account, looking at the subsidiary ledger for accounts receivable, looking at the inventory detail for the inventory, prepaid insurance, checking the insurance documentation. We're going to do adjustments for some of these because we'll do the adjusting entries in a second in a later presentation. Unearned funds, seeing if we have those unearned funds. Furniture and fixture should be the same. After we shouldn't have too many transactions in there. In other words, accounts payable, we check the detail for who we owe. The Visa, we check our Visa card to see if we still owe that. Payroll liability, we can look through our payroll documentation for the last payroll. And then the sales tax payable should be in accordance with the sales receipts and invoices we have created in February. We should have paid January. And then the loan payable should be in accordance with our loan documentation. And the owner's equity, if everything else is correct, should be correct. So we can double check all that. And then on the income statement, this is all part of equity on the balance sheet. So if all those other accounts were correct, these should be good. So for example, the merchandise sales, rent equipment, and service equipment, the other side of that is either cash or accounts receivable. So if those cash or accounts receivable are good, then these should be okay, hopefully too. Cost of goods sold, the other side of that is inventory. So if inventory is good, then hopefully cost of goods sold is good as well. Computer equipment, we're going to verify that probably with cash that we paid when we do the bank reconciliation. Interest expense, probably with cash that we paid. We've got the payroll taxes we can support with the checks that we made, as well as the utilities. So all the balance sheet accounts that we looked at can help us to verify these income statement accounts as well. And then the interest income and our net income, this for the month of February, and then this for the month of January. So then we have the change. So then we can go to our detailed report, and we can go to reports up top and go to the accounting and taxes, and we want to go to the transaction list by date. And I'm just going to look for the February this time. So we're going to go 02/01/19 to 02/28/19. So just like we did for January, if you go through this, this will give you, similar to a GL, all the activity, but instead of by account, but by date. So we have our transaction type here, checks, deposits, sales receipts, bills, payments, invoices, the dates that they happened, the number, the name, vendors, as well as customers and other, any memos we put in place, which is useful if we put the memos in place. And then we have the account cleared, the split, the other account that will be involved. So that at least two accounts. If there's only two accounts, then we'll see the two accounts. If there's more than two accounts, we'll end up with a split here. And then the amounts. So what you want to do then is go through these amounts. And if you tick and tie each of these amounts off, and we started at the same starting point, meaning January's numbers were all correct, then February should be correct as well. They may be out of order, so if the date is different, you can check the date, and we can change the dates by double-clicking on this and going into the documents and changing the dates. But be careful doing that in practice, especially if you're changing dates in a prior time period. So you'd want to go through each of these transactions and basically just tick and tie off each of these transactions. You can do that easily by exporting to Excel possibly and making each a different color as you find it. That's one way to do it. Or you could print it out and of course tick and tie this information off as we go. And if all this is the same, then everything for February should be in place properly. If anything is not the same, then I would check the date ranges, meaning you're going to want to go up top and possibly look at a broader date range and see what differs. Now, of course, if you go into January, you're going to have data in January that we recorded. If we recorded something past February, you can change this date range upwards. And if there's any more added information, then it's possible that we just have an incorrect date, which is often the case when there's a problem. So that's one way to check things out. So if something's missing, you can see if you can expand the date range and see if you can find that missing information in the wider date range, and then adjust the date. If there's something on your section that isn't here, then we would want to see if there's a duplicate. Is there a duplicate that happened, or is there just a miskey in terms of the number or dollar amount in the information? For more accounting information and accounting courses, visit our website at accountinginstruction.info.